The WNBA may be on break, but there is a lot going on in the world of the WNBA. SF Gate sports editor Alex Simon here to talk about it. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And a very pleasant Monday to you. Howard Megdal here, welcoming you to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, showing up for us 6 times a week. We show up for you. Over 200,000 of you showed up for us in July alone. Really appreciate it, not just on my behalf, but for everyone over at The Next, thenexthoops.com, where you can get over 100 reported pieces every single week on the past, present, and future of women's basketball. We had a group of 7 folks swarming All-Star weekend. We have folks out in Paris as we speak, covering the Olympics. Thenexthoops.com, $9 a month, $72 a year, best money you're ever going to spend. Build women's sports media with us together. And somebody who's very familiar with the building of women's sports coverage, who's done terrific work at SF Gate, at Bay Area News Group. I'm trying to remember. I feel like a familiar face at places like The Next and High Post Hoops. I don't know, my memory may be deceiving me, but back in the day, I think that was the case for Alex Simon, who joins us. Alex, am I remembering that right?
You are. You haven't gotten me out of the walls yet in that regard. So
Never. So we have a lot to talk about when it comes to what's going on in the WNBA. And there is a team that is going to take shape over the next few months in Golden State. The Golden State Valkyries going to go through, essentially it's Alex's home market team, the Golden State Progress Report here in segment 1. Segment 2, talking more about All-Star Game reflections writ large. Alex was out there in Phoenix. He can take us through what we heard from Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, and what we learned about the league writ large as a result of everything that happened in Phoenix this past weekend. And we are also going to talk media rights fallout. Truth is, we love talking about the media rights deals, always have, always will. So we'll be talking about that quite a bit. But the place where I think we need to start is just, Alex, every 15 minutes, I get an email saying that the Golden State Valkyries have sold another 1,000 season ticket deposits. At that rate, what building can even hold them?
Well, it certainly is looking very solid for what will come when they make the choice for season ticket sales. I will just couch the excitement very briefly to say that the season ticket deposit is just a $25 deposit that people are placing down. If you don't buy season tickets, it's $25 to have been on the list. But relatively speaking, it won't be the price of season tickets even at $25 a game for some seats. That said, to have 15,000 plus people before so many pieces of information are still yet unknown about this team, most notably any player or ways to get a player, which we'll get into later, is such a sign about the excitement in this market. They've already crescendoed any number that you could possibly imagine from another women's sports team for pre-arrival deposits for an expansion team. I believe Chase Center, as I very quickly loaded up on the Google here, has a capacity of about 18,000 for basketball. So you're already looking at them being about close to being able to sell out the building if every single one of those season ticket deposits becomes somebody who buys season tickets. We'll have to see. I don't expect that they believe it's 100%, but it's certainly a sign that this is an organization and a community that is ready to be fully in the WNBA. And I think the WNBA might not be ready for them, frankly, rather than them being not ready for the WNBA.
Well, let's talk about both sides of that because they're both real interesting to me. And you know this area well. This is your home turf. And we've talked about it informally and off the air for years about the fact that there have long been conversations about bringing a professional women's basketball team to the Bay Area. You can go back and look at newspaper clippings 5, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, not an exaggeration. I came across that in the course of my book research. I remember sending to you one late night when I was deep in there that in 2008, we're talking about when will the Bay Area get a women's professional basketball team. Archaeologists discovered cave drawings from ancient times talking about when will the Bay Area get a team. And I say all that by virtue of wondering, had it happened prior to now, would it have been the same thing as this just pent up desire for that team? Is it meeting the moment? How do you account for it?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, and we should give Kate Fagan a great shout out for her book, but she details the very first women's basketball game pretty much ever was in the Bay Area between longtime rivals and ACC legendary programs, Cal and Stanford. Yes, a thing that I see your face cringing at, ACC programs, Cal and Stanford. But this has been a market that has constantly supported women's basketball. You could go back to the beginnings of the sport in that regard. But I think it's been a combination. Look, there was not necessarily very stable ownership in the market for the men's basketball team here until about 2010. The Golden State Warriors in that time, since Joe Lacob bought them, have become one of the premier franchises in all of American sports, not just NBA or basketball. But
are you suggesting the Golden State Warriors were not a premier sports organization prior to Joe Lacob buying that team?
I certainly would be happy to take you through how many playoff series I saw in my lifetime up until this guy Steph Curry showed up. There's only been one season of it up until that point. Anyway, to the point though, I think this is a combination of a market that really does like women's basketball. I mean, the Stanford program is a little bit of a different fan community, but they've had that fan support and they've had consistent success. Cal has had solid fan support over the years, and it's a market where players have come from time and time again. Howard, 2/12 of this current U.S. Olympic team are Bay Area people in Sabrina Ionescu and Chelsea Gray. Yeah. So this is a market that has always been ready for this team. I couldn't give you there's a litany of reasons why. And frankly, I remember 16 months ago when Bay FC, this NWSL team, was announced, I called up Tara Vanderveer that day and she goes, "That's great. And gosh, it should be women's basketball. It should be a basketball team." And that's kind of been the feeling. So to have the team now, fantastic moment. And now the time is, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, Tara, one of the great coaches in ACC history. So when you look at the other side, no, I can't. It's still too soon. When you look at the other side of it, right, the WNBA, just take me through the plan for the expansion draft that Kathy Engelbert and the league laid out over in Phoenix.
Yeah, so I was in Phoenix and actually went to a Valkyries event, which was very nice to see. They're very excited about things and got to talk with a lot of people, as did Marissa Ingemi at the San Francisco Chronicle. And she's covered this team breathlessly, basically, since the moment they existed. I would highly recommend. She's also like a kind of colleague since we're owned by the same company. So I should make that acknowledgement. But more to the point, Marissa and several other people have been asking, like, what's the plan? And one of my biggest takeaways from being in Phoenix and asking the questions is that there is no plan still. And we're now 4 months from the expansion draft, and nobody knows what that's going to look like officially on the record yet, which is kind of baffling, Howard, don't you think?
I do. And a number of WNBA executives from other teams I've spoken to are equally perplexed because, yes, Golden State will need players or else 15,000 season ticket holders are going to be very disappointed seeing just like a basketball sitting at midcourt with no one to bounce it. But the other teams also need to plan for this. And so having it set in stone, having it sent out to teams for them to be able to start to plan matters not just now, but you have to be planning. Any organization worth its salt is planning for 2026 as well. And we know there's going to be another expansion team coming in 2026 in Toronto. So there's a lot of reasons why the plans need to have. So I want to talk more about that, hear what else you heard in Phoenix, what you think it all means in segment 2. We're going to get back to it with Alex Simon. One last thing, just need to point out, Marissa, who you pointed out, not just a colleague of yours, but the best America has to offer. So just have to say that about Marissa as well. Okay, back with Alex Simon talking more about this right after our break. But first, Locked on Women's Basketball is brought to you by Magic Spoon. So when I was very young, I loved basketball and I loved cereal. And a lot of people matured or they found something else to do with their lives, but not me, not me. I have not in any way matured on either front. So I love basketball and I also love the cereals I ate growing up. But my doctor tells me that I should make sure I eat cereal in the right way so I can consume lots of basketball for many, many years to come. And Magic Spoon helps you do that. It keeps you away from having to worry about sugar. The variety pack, for instance, has 0 grams of sugar, which I've looked into, and turns out that's not a lot. 13 to 14 grams of protein, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. You compare it to some of the cereals that I grew up eating on the rare occasions that my parents had their back turned, and it's a much better situation health wise. There are 4 flavors in the variety pack. You got cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. So I recommend all 4 of them. You can get them too. Go to magicspoon.com/locked on to grab a variety pack and try it today. Make sure you use our promo code, which is locked on at checkout to save $5 off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to save $5 off your order. So start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high protein cereal at magicspoon.com/locked on and use the code locked on to save $5 off. Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode. Locked on Women's Basketball is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience, the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts. And if you want to know whether they fit your car, and I will just be honest with you, I have no idea. I have no idea if they fit my car. I know what a tire is. That's about as far as it goes. But there's this little green check mark that you put in what car you have, and they tell you. It's called the eBay Guaranteed Fit. I love it. It saves me because I don't know, but eBay Motors does. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here in segment 2 with Alex Simon is at sfgate.com. And Alex, you had the opportunity, as you said, to hear from Golden State. You heard from Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, got to take in the scene in and around Phoenix. Where are we 4 months out from not just expansion draft, but really kind of moving forward on everything from, frankly, Golden State's going to need to have a head coach. I've looked into it, and league regulations stipulate that, probably some assistants as well. Where do things stand?
Yeah, I think the head coach front, that's going to come probably in more of the normal hiring cycle, just in case there's somebody that shakes loose that they're really interested in. You just don't know. But the urgency doesn't really kick up for that until the rest of the WNBA season ends. The biggest question that I've had and continue to have, frankly, is something that I also noticed at that same event that the Valkyries hosted along with Together hosted the returning podcast from Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, and one of their guests was somebody who I think Golden State would very much like to have come play in the Bay Area, and that was Paige Bueckers, who's pretty much almost as guaranteed to be the number 1 pick as anyone's ever been guaranteed to be the number 1 pick in a draft going into next year. And because it's been so long, we truly don't know if beyond the expansion draft, Howard, how is the league going to handle expansion teams with the lottery and the college player draft? Because if you're Golden State, you would absolutely love any way, shape, and form to even be in the lottery and have a chance with the ping pong balls to get Paige. You don't need to get her given to you outright with the number 1 pick. But if you just give us a shot in the lottery, I think Golden State would love that, just to be able to say they have a chance and keep the intrigue up. But Kathy has not at this time even given us any indication as to that process and where they'll fit. In past expansions, they were put kind of either all the way at the back of the teams who missed the playoffs, or they were slotted with the first pick after the lottery balls picked the one. So I think they were 4th when there was 3 lottery slots in past WNBA expansions. We just don't know. And you kind of touched on all the executives, but I think it's an even bigger issue when you think about it from a Golden State perspective. How there was so many executives from around the league in Phoenix. It's kind of turned into a mini convention in the middle of the season in that way. If you were Golden State, you could have gotten a lot of your negotiation done about the expansion draft in person with a bunch of people and kind of set everything up if you knew the rules. And right now, Ohima Nayanen has been talking to Marissa over at the Chronicle and talking about the fact that, they have all of these permutations that they're going to be looking at and being ready for. But, we're 4 months away. You probably should just give them what the thing is to let them not have to be so focused on how many players they have to potentially scout in that regard. That's, to me, the biggest thing that we learned from Kathy was all of the things that the league still doesn't know that they are in control of. The media rights deal, they weren't as directly in control of. But everything that the league was in control of, there was still a lot of questions left open-ended.
I mean, that distinction is the one that I always kind of make when I see people who are critical of the league over things that they ultimately can't make a determination about themselves. In this case, that's very different. And yeah, listen, the folks I talk to think critical mass is around the idea of the first non-lottery pick going to Golden State, but that hasn't been finalized. The folks I talk to have stressed that has not been finalized. The good news is for Golden State that Ohima is as capable of figuring out all the permutations as anyone I've covered through the years, and that was a really good hire by the Valkyries. So I am curious to see when they officially find out, when everyone else finds out. But truly, to your point, and again, I just keep going back to this, Golden State's got plans to make. Hell, Toronto's got plans to make going into 2026. And it's especially significant at this moment in time when you have the potential for the players opting out of a CBA at the end of this year, leading to a Wild West scenario next year. Not only that, 85% of the leagues are bound to be free agents after the 2025 season, effectively. I think who are the 2 players that are signed in 2026? Kalani Brown
and Lexi Brown.
Thank you, and Lexi Brown. And outside of that, everyone else either, we say free agent or potentially under the reserve,
Yeah, look, let's
the CBA could change.
There's so much about the league that's unknown. And frankly, I think the big thing that I took away from All-Star is how much of those things are clearly dictating a lot of the kind of indecision, I think, perhaps around the league. And part of that even is the All-Star game itself. Phoenix very clearly, I think in hindsight, made it known they wanted the All-Star game, and the W gave it to them and announced it at the 2023 All-Star game. I found it really fascinating to me that we had that precedent that might have been set, and the league has let the 2025 All-Star game, assuming we have one, which I think is fair in a non-Olympic and non-World Cup year, right. We don't have any announcement about it. And frankly, the way Phoenix did it, I think has set a standard that every other city in the W that maybe hasn't lived up to that standard in the past now has to match, if not exceed. And so even the hosting of these major events that draw people in from all over and draw celebrities in who don't even do anything to kind of earn publicity other than just, I want to hang out here. That was the thing that I took away, is how many were just wanting to be here for random reasons or just because this seemed like the place to be. So within that, the league is kind of probably adjusting to the new reality that's clearly coming. And this new media deal that we'll talk about is part of that. But there's so many other things on the periphery of that where they have to either set the new standard or completely blow old standards out of the water. And I'm not sure that everything is happening as quickly as the movement is happening, if you will.
And which is very hard, which, by the way, I mean, to me, I give the league a lot of leeway on that because it's happening so fast. But I appreciate your teaser leading me into segment 3. Just such a pro's pro. So thank you. Back with more from Alex Simon in just a second. But first, let's talk about game time. And Alex, you've spent a little time with Juliet, my daughter. So you understand she is a very precise, a very exact young woman, right? That'd be fair to say?
I think that's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so somebody who's precise, who wants things in a certain way, who has a vision for them, really makes good use of the app Game Time. Game Time's app is not just a place where you can go and buy tickets. It's a place where you can buy tickets. You can get them last minute with these great last minute deals. So suddenly you can get them for less. All right, great. There's tickets to a game I know Juliet wants to go to, a concert she wants to go to. She's a Renaissance woman. And it's not just about where are the seats. It's what's the view from your seats. And Game Time gives you this 360-degree view right on the app of where you're going to sit. It's as simple as customize your spot. The app has so many of these great features and it's so easy to use, but you're probably wondering, how do you get them? Well, download the Game Time app today, create an account, and if you use the code LOCKEDONNBA, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed, Juliet approved. Back here in segment 3 with the great Alex Simon talking about media rights fallout. And I just want to start at the top because this is something that you and I spent too much time talking about, really.
Way too much.
Yeah, life is short, right? You know, we have friends, we have family, but here we are again talking about media rights deals. And I think it's fair to say that when I wrote back in 2022, Apple made this deal, Apple TV, for $250 million for Major League Soccer. That the way we talked about it was, all right, they got a premium monetarily to trade off where the games were going to be. They weren't going to be at these legacy places. They weren't going to have the same kind of push behind them. So now you fast forward here, and the league is getting what looks like around $200 million per year. They're staying on ESPN. They're also potentially going to be adding additional partners. I know there are additional partners in the $200 million, but the ESPN part is a big deal because it includes ABC. And then if you add additional partners, that number is likely to push past 250 without sacrificing the type of push you can get from being on outlets that are more readily accessible. It feels like the league and Kathy Engelbert had their cake and ate it too. Is that how you see it?
I do, but not to the full extent that you do. And I think we've had some differences here. I think two of the big factors where I'm still, I should say three. Number one, the length of this deal. This is far too long of a deal for the current exponential growth potential of the WNBA, the likes of which we are in year one of a potential new reality in terms of ratings in that regard.
I do want to jump and just say, not that I'm disagreeing, and that is certainly a concern, but there is a reevaluation method that's being talked about, been reported about after year three. Now, I've talked to folks.
Hold on. I have seen a person called Howard Megdal report at the 9 that this is not necessarily a clause that anyone expects to be able to be very actioned. But right. You are correct. There is a possibility in year 3 of an 11-year deal that still leaves an 8-year gap at the end of the deal where the money is set in stone in a league that we frankly didn't. Number two, the second kind of thing to me, I do look at what you've talked about very legitimately, that Apple in that regard has been able to pay to buy the premium in that way. Now, the W has crescendoed that money, but that was in a world where the WNBA ratings and MLS ratings were equal. And we don't have MLS ratings to base off of pretty much at all anymore. But the ratings that the WNBA was getting when that felt like a target goal is very much not right now.
I mean, just to that point, it would give me like a series of mini strokes. The idea that just because the WNBA was a women's league, that having the same ratings as Major League Soccer didn't somehow equate to a similar value in the marketplace. It made no sense. In fact, it was the opposite, because it was even harder to get the specific demographics of the audience that the WNBA had. So yes to all of that. The Major League Soccer, as near as I understand it, has never put up the type of ratings that we are seeing routinely this year out of the WNBA.
So that's and within that, that's number two. That would tell you that the money should not just be what the MLS got for what it was doing, but multiple times more. And I think that leads really to my third and the biggest point I have, which is Kathy Engelbert consistently talked about for years that the WNBA was historically undervalued. And if you look at almost every WNBA media deal signed up until what we thought was going to be this one, the negotiation for that media deal was done by the NBA, signing the WNBA's rights for it in its own contracts. What tells me, while there's still space for WNBA specific deals, and they've signed those before and seem ready to sign them again, what should I take as a viewer to believe that the method that undervalued you before is not doing the same thing now, even if the number has jumped? To me, it's impossible to look at this and say, if you said this is the thing that was undervalued before, why are you using the exact same methodology to take it this time?
So, as you know, I asked her about just this thing on draft night back in April. And her argument is that as part of a package that gives you a 365-day calendar, because effectively the W is there in the part of the season that the NBA is not, is of higher value than the sum of its parts. That is the theory behind it. I will also say, playing devil's advocate, and I say devil's advocate, but truly, I'm agnostic on it. I don't necessarily agree that because that method led to an undervaluing, that the method was the reason that these were undervalued time after time after time. Frankly, I don't think the WNBA ever pushed properly once you got past Val Ackerman's reign in terms of, I mean, I don't even have to end that sentence. They just never put on anything, but certainly media rights deal as part of it. So the point is well taken, and I don't think you can rule that out, and we'll obviously never have the counterfactual. But to your larger point,
and look, and I'm going to be clear. I am arguing on very specific things for what is undoubtedly an excellent development for the league at large, and is going to create several positive ripple effects. But it's tough for me to look at this as the pure and simple win when there's still some unanswered questions. Kathy at All-Star did not talk about it because the media rights weren't finalized. And I think a little curiously, and perhaps because of pending litigation with Warner Brothers and TNT, they haven't had a press conference to discuss it. This is the number one question I frankly still have for Kathy, because we just don't know. Taken on the whole sum of what? I think it's probably about $50 or $60 million that you would look at as the current total media deals when you add all the extra. They basically duplicated by 4, which is an immense growth. The NWSL, with not as strong of ratings as the WNBA, went from 1.5 to 60 million a year. 1.5 was obviously undervalued, but that type of growth certainly felt possible in maybe the wildest of dreams. But it's definitely stuff that the ratings this season would reflect somebody might have been a little crazy to go do. I mean, we had reports, Howard, that Fox was trying to convince Caitlin Clark to stay in college to try to keep her ratings with an NIL deal. Like, there's clearly some crazy money ready to be thrown here. And I just feel as if, because it wasn't a pure WNBA only negotiation, rather, as Kathy's answer to you said, the WNBA as part of a NBA world and negotiated as part of the NBA and owned to 42 or plus whatever percent that the NBA has it. That's where the WNBA still fits with this media deal, rather than as a true and completely independent body.
All of that is true. It is still, as we've talked about, and we definitely don't have time to get into the ownership scenario with the WNBA owning essentially about 42% of itself, but that's a whole other conversation for a different time. Yes, a big win. Questions still remain. I will just say, last devil's advocate, not that I believe this one for a second, but sure, viewing habits could change. There could be ebb just as much as there is flow. Maybe this is a one-year wonder. Certainly, by virtue of us sitting here and the life that we lead, we definitely don't believe that's the case.
Yeah, the asteroid could come any day, Howard.
That is very true, right? And the universe can someday break apart, and then what are all the media rights still worth?
Rest in peace, Bill Walton.
Wow. Delighted to talk. Bill Walton, notable, I will say, Big Ten all-time great.
Oh, you just had to end there.
Too soon. Alex Simon, you are everything that's right in journalism today. Thank you for your time. Until tomorrow, I will be back with you. Coquise Washington, head coach at Rutgers, will be joining us talking about the Scarlet Knights. Looking forward to that. Have a wonderful night. I am Howard Megdal, wishing you a lovely rest of your Monday.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.